for you, well, that's a whole other story. But friendship, and a true friend, a friend that you can count on, a friend that is going to be there no matter what, a friend that understands that you are not perfect, a friend that knows that you are going to need at times encouragement, a friend who knows at times that you're going to need a push. But friend, the specialness of friends. This week we delve into marriage. And we look at the idea of marriage, and a couple of quotes I want to share about marriage. First and foremost is this: a perfect marriage is two imperfect people who refuse to give up on each other. That's okay, that's nice. And this one says, a happy marriage is a union of two forgivers. And you need to be a good forgiver when you're married, because you will have your differences, you will have your disagreements and so forth, and there is a time where you have to seek forgiveness of your spouse. But my favorite, and it's one that hangs up, that we had hanging up. Julie and I found it early in our marriage, and we had it hanging up in our house forever. And it's simply this: marriage is finding that special someone that you can drive crazy for the rest of your life. And we love that. And that was just, we felt that fit well with who we were. And with that, you know, when Julie and I were first dating and kind of really getting close to getting married, we would go to a lot of movies because we lived in Carrington and there was nothing to do but go to movies for dates. And we went to a lot of movies, and it took us a long time to find that perfect movie. And the first movie that we ever both went to, that we both came out of and said, man, I really liked that movie. And it was The Princess Bride. And I didn't think it would be any good, because let's be real, it's The Princess Bride. And I'm going, what is she dragging me to? But if you've seen the movie, you understand it's just a wonderful, funny, incredible movie. And there's the line in there that I have had quoted to me at more weddings as the pastor. I've had asked, are you going to start it this way? And they always say, you know what it is? Marriage is what brings us together today. And they always ask, are you going to start that way? And I go, no, I'm not going to start that way. I love the movie, but we're not going to do that. But that is what brings us together today. It's marriage. And we're going to talk about marriage. And if you have your handout, you can take it out and you can follow along. And as you look at the handout, you can see we're starting with the questions at the beginning. And there's a reason for that. It's because I want you guys to be thinking about how this fits into your life. And there's three categories that I'm going to speak to today. The first is for those that are looking to get married. And here's a couple of questions to be thinking about as we go through the sermon. What type of person do you want to marry? I hope you've thought that through. I hope you're not just hoping for the best, but you've thought through what kind of person you want to marry. And along with that, if you plan to have children, now not every couple plans to have children, and that's fine, but if you plan to have children, what will he or she make a good parent? And that's something to think about as you begin the process of looking for your future spouse. But then the third question I want you to think about through this sermon is this: are you a worthy candidate for marriage? Are you someone that is desirable? And I don't mean you're the best looking or anything, but do you have the right traits to be a good spouse, whether it be a husband or a wife? Now, the second group I'm going to talk to are those that are married. And a couple of questions for you to think about is simply this: are you a good spouse? How are you doing as a spouse? Evaluate yourself. You know, now you may be a good spouse, but there's always room for improvement. What are some ways in which you can improve? The other question to think about is this: if you come and go through a lot of these characteristics, what things do you need to change or improve to be a better spouse? Now, that's one thing I had to learn early in my marriage. I could always be better. I was never the perfect spouse. And even though I had this guy in Aberdeen who used to swear he had the perfect marriage, there's no such thing as the perfect marriage, but he'd always brag about, I have the perfect marriage, and his wife was my secretary, and I'd look at her and she'd just go, we do not have the perfect marriage. But he loved to brag because he loved his wife dearly, and they did have a phenomenal marriage. But there was always room to improve. And the last group is simply those that wish to remain single. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. There are some of you out here that never wish to be married again or ever. And so for you, I just want you to take a look at this sermon and look at the characteristics. Which of these characteristics will make me a better Christian? Because even though it may not be specifically talking to you in the context of marriage, many of these qualities are important to instill in our life. So let's step into this idea of marriage. What does Proverbs, in particular, say about marriage? Now, I know there are many other passages in the Bible that talk about marriage, but we're specifically going to limit it to what we find in Proverbs. And what Proverbs gives us are different characteristics of a good husband and a good wife. Now, you're going to see through the book of Proverbs, it's heavily weighted. There's more, Solomon talks more about the good wife than he does about the good husband, but both are addressed. And the first thing, though, I want to talk about is this: the importance of choosing the right spouse. So for those of you in the category of looking, I want to give you things to think about. Why is it important that you choose the right spouse? Well, this is, Proverbs 12:4 gives us the first hint. A wife of noble character is her husband's crown, but a disgraceful wife is like decay in his bones. In other words, our happiness and peace depend upon it. You want to enjoy happiness in a marriage? You want to enjoy peace in a marriage? You have to look for the right spouse. When we talk about the wife of noble character is the husband's crown, it means her character brings joy and honor and dignity to her husband. And on the flip side, while it's not said in this verse, the husband needs to lift up and to honor his wife. The second part of the verse said a disgraceful wife is like decay in his bones. In other words, the alternative of not finding the right spouse is she will bring shame on her husband. And then, of course, destroys the harmony of the home. And that works both ways. If you don't find the right spouse, it makes life difficult. So the first thing is our happiness and peace depend on it. The second thing, it is a hard mistake to correct. It is the second most important decision you're going to make in your life. Number one being to put your faith in Christ Jesus. But marriage is the ultimate institution that God created for the procreation, for the expansion of mankind. Way back in Genesis 2:24, a man will leave his mother and father, and he will be united to his wife, and they will become one flesh. It's the foundation, all the way back in Genesis. And so it's a difficult thing to fix. So we have to be very careful in choosing. But we can develop great character. Even if sometimes we may not have the perfect marriage, there is always place to improve, and there's always time to build a strong marriage. Don't be discouraged if right now your marriage is struggling, because every marriage at some point or another goes through struggles. For Julie and I, our toughest time was while we were in seminary. And it was extremely difficult. And we had a lot of days where we didn't want to talk to each other, and we didn't like each other very much. It was stressful, and it was a difficult time, but we worked through it. And you can do that too. So don't be discouraged if the marriage isn't in the right place. You have time, and you have, with God's help, you can get it to where it needs to be. So what is the ideal wife? Now, I'm not saying your wife or future wife has to be this perfect or have every one of these characteristics, but I think they're good characteristics to think about. But first and foremost, I believe at the top of every list is she is a Christian woman who fears the Lord. If you don't start there, if you don't begin with that, if you don't put as your top priority that she is a Christian, that she is a person who is surrendered to God, that she knows God is first and foremost in her life and her future husband is number two, then you don't want to marry her. It talks about it in Proverbs, I lost my transfer, Proverbs 19. It says, a quarrelsome wife is like a constant dripping of a leaky roof. Houses and wealth are inherited from parents, but a prudent wife is from the Lord. And so what is a prudent wife? Well, let me give you just a few characteristics. A prudent wife is one who makes wise decisions that benefit the whole household. She carefully manages the household. That's a prudent wife. She gives godly counsel to her husband. Proverbs 31:26, she speaks with wisdom and faithful instruction is on her tongue. She models godly character. Again, from Proverbs 31, verses 10 to 12. A wife of noble character who can find she is worth more than rubies. Her husband has full confidence and lacks nothing of value. She brings him good and not harm all the days of her life. As a woman, a godly woman. And of course, 19:14 calls her a gift from God. And Proverbs 18:22 says, he who finds a wife finds what is good and receives favor from the Lord. A wife that fears the Lord is the first characteristic, and I think is very important, and that's the starting point. The second characteristic, when if you're as a wife, or if those of you that are looking for your wife, she is a woman of discretion. Proverbs 11:22, like a gold ring and a pig's snout is a beautiful woman who shows no discretion. You know, Solomon doesn't mince words there. What good is the beauty of the gold ring if it's in the snout of a pig? The same thing is, what is it to have the most beautiful wife, but is one of the most horrible people on the inside? Discretion defined is this: she avoids inappropriate behavior. Her desires align with God's standards. She surrounds herself with godly people. Men, be careful. Do not look just for the outer beauty, but look for the inner beauty. And that's what Solomon is getting at in this verse. He says, look, what good is a beautiful piece of jewelry if it's hanging around a pig's snout? The woman you choose starts with the inner beauty. And I'll tell you right now, you find a woman of great inner beauty, the outer beauty is going to take care of itself. Because the most beautiful women are those that have that beautiful, godly inner beauty. The third thing about a wife is this: she is trustworthy. Again, all the way through Proverbs 31, verse 11, her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. 25, she is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. She knows the future may not be easy, but she's ready for it. Verse 26, she speaks with wisdom and faithful instruction is on her tongue. She's a trustworthy woman because she is founded in God. The fourth characteristic is this: she works hard to care for her household. She is not lazy, but she understands. Now, that doesn't mean that she does all the work around the house. It means that she cares and takes care of her household. Back to 31, it says 13 through 15. She selects the wool and flax, works with eager hands. She is like the merchant ships bringing food from afar. She gets up while it is still night. She provides for her family and portions for her female servants. She clothes them. She feeds them. She makes sure all things are taken care of within the house. I've told you before, my grandma Koenig was one of the most incredible women and taught me more about what family is than any other person in my life. And this is a woman that loved to spend time with her grandchildren. So she would get up, Hours before us lazy bums of grandchildren would get up, she prepared all the food for the day so she could spend the rest of the day playing. Is that we have a godly wife who works and cares for her family. Verse 21 to 22 says, when it snows, she has no fear for her household, for all of them are clothed in scarlet. In other words, the scarlet meaning a double layer. Okay, when we are kids, what does our mothers make sure we have? About 8 layers of clothes on in the middle of the winter, even though we want to go out in a hoodie and shorts. But she makes sure that we are dressed properly. And verse 27 says, she watches over the affairs of her household and does not eat bread of idleness. She is at work, and she is making sure the work is done. And the last thing is this, and this is so important, she is compassionate. Verse 20 in Proverbs 31, she opens her arms to the poor and extends her hands to the needy. You find a woman who has a heart for people, you have found an incredible woman. Now, Solomon doesn't just give you things to look for, he looks for things that you should avoid. And these are some of the characteristics to avoid in a wife. A woman who is argumentative. Now, that doesn't mean she can't disagree, and that doesn't mean she can't stand her ground, because it's important, but it's the one who constantly wants to quarrel is what he's talking about. Chapter 19, verse 13, a quarrelsome wife is like a constant dripping of a leaky roof. Drip, 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 drip. A woman who nags, who is constantly trying to pick a fight. Better to live in the corner of the roof than to share a house with a quarrelsome woman. Better to live in a desert than with a quarrelsome and nagging wife. A quarrelsome wife is, again, like a drippy, leaky roof in a rainstorm. Restraining her is like restraining the wind or grasping oil with the hand. Be very careful. Women, be very careful. You should be able to express yourself. That's not my point. But my point is be very careful that we're not being argumentative. And the other one is a contemptible woman. And chapter 30, verse 23, going back up to verse 21, it says, under 3 things the earth trembles, under 4 it cannot bear up. These are 4 signs that things aren't good. One of them is a contemptible woman who gets married. And what is a contemptible woman? And I looked and I searched for the best definition, and I found it in Bible Hub, and this is what they describe as a contemptible woman. It describes someone whose character is marked by traits such as bitterness, pride, disrespect, and moral corruption. Solomon says, avoid these women, because they are going to have nothing but conflict in your household. So that's the woman. What's the ideal man? Now, it's interesting in the book of Proverbs, husband is only mentioned 7 times. 4 of them deal directly with when describing the wife, which leaves 3 small verses. But what's interesting, there are many traits that Solomon addresses that deal with what a husband should be. And of course, the first one is this: he is a Christian man who fears the Lord. Now, we do not date people to save them. I saw that a lot growing up. I don't see it as much now, but they meet a guy, he's a non-Christian, but they think, well, I can save him, so it's okay to date him. But more than likely, that man's going to pull you away than you're going to pull him to God. So be careful. Now, that doesn't mean you don't work to save him. I think that's wonderful. But before you start actually dating, you should make sure he is a Christian man who fears the Lord. Because in Proverbs 1:7, way back at the beginning of this, it says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. The wisdom of God. Are they seeking it? The second thing is he surrounds himself with godly people and listens to them. Proverbs 12:15. The way of fools seems right to them, but the wise listen to advice. You want to date a man who seeks out godly men and not only seeks them out, but actually listens to what they say. Proverbs 13:20. Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. You want a man who has surrounded himself with the right people. The third characteristic is this: he is slow to anger. Whoever is patient has great understanding, but one who is quick-tempered displays folly. You want a man who is in control. Because this is also the man that is going to be the head of the household. This is the man that is going to be the father of your children. So be careful you have a man who knows how to control himself. Again, just like a wife, he is compassionate. Whoever shuts their ears to the cry of the poor will also cry out and not be answered. The importance of showing compassion, because you also want that husband to be compassionate to you and to your children. The next one is this: he is respected by other godly people. We'll go back to Proverbs 31. Her husband, it says in verse 23a, her husband is respected at the city gate. Now, it doesn't mean he has to be this man of great power and anything. It's just a man who people look at and say, that's a godly man. That is a guy I can trust. That's the kind of husband you want. The second part of that verse says that he is a leader. It says, where he takes a seat among the elders of the land. You want a good leader. You want someone who knows how to lead a household, because you are partnering with him to build a home. And the last thing is this: he respects and honors his wife. Proverbs 31:28, the second part of the verse, and 29. Her husband also, he praises her. Many women do noble things, but you surpass them all, is what the husband says about his wife. And in 31, it says, honor her for all that her hands have done, and let her works bring her praise at the city gate. Now, I'm going to do a quick survey. And I know there's a few of you out there that have done premarital counseling with me. And I was asked this question of all the prospective husbands. It's simply this: who has the best wife? Show of hands. Yeah, okay, I can see that. Every husband's hand should be up, because you have the best wife. The number one thing you can do is make sure your wife understands you have the best wife. Now, you're all wrong. I had the best wife. No, I'm kidding. I did have the best wife, but you have the best wife as well. Lift her up. Respect her. Honor her. Do it especially in front of the children. They need to see you as a father honoring their mother and respecting her, so they in tune have an understanding of what that looks like, because I ask my children to always have respect for their mother. And the number one rule in the house that you could break is disrespect mom. It was when the most punishment came, and it was the most upset your father was ever going to be. Because nobody gets to talk to your wife in a disrespectful way, even your own kids. So what are some things to avoid in a husband? Well, the first one is this: a man with a wandering eye. Go back to Proverbs, chapters 5 through 7, and we touched on that to some degree, but in chapter 6, verses 27 to 29, can a man scoop fire into his lap without his clothes being burned? Can a man walk on hot coals without his feet being scorched? So is he who sleeps with another man's wife. No one who touches her, will go unpunished. You got to be careful that you do not have a husband with a wandering eye. And men, we have to be very careful in how we go about our lives. Because the temptation is always there. In this culture especially, you don't have to work hard to find ways to allow your eye to wander. So be very careful. Things to avoid in a husband is this: a man with a quick temper. Proverbs 22, do not make friends with a hot-tempered person. Do not associate with one easily angered, or you may learn their ways and get yourself ensnared. As I mentioned earlier, you want a man who is in control. Men, you want to show that you are in control. And lastly, you do not want a husband who is a lover of money. Now, I have no problem making money, but it's the one who has a lover of money. Proverbs 15:27. The greedy bring ruin to their households, but the one who hates bribes will live. It is okay to make money. It is okay to have wealth, but it should not be the priority of what you do in your life. You have a much happier home with less money and one where the love of money is not present. So there you go. There's the breakdown of the ideal woman and the ideal man. Now, granted, did I cover everything? No, but I think this is a good start. And I know that, those that are married, there's always work to do. Those that are looking, it's being careful as you are dating, who you are dating and who you are getting close to. But in conclusion, I just want to say three things to all three groups that I addressed earlier. May God bless those who are searching. Do not compromise the godly traits you have set up. Do not compromise the things you are looking for in a spouse. Because as I said, it's the second most important decision you're going to make in your life. And I can tell you wholeheartedly that when you have the right partner, it's the most amazing thing. You can conquer anything, any circumstance, any trial, any difficulty. You have no problem because you have chosen the right person. So in your search, don't lose sight of the godly traits that you are looking for in a spouse. To those of you who are married, may God challenge those of you who are married to be better spouses. May you continue to grow in your marriage. And another thing I say in all of my premarital counseling sessions is this: the closer you get to God, the closer you will get to your spouse. The further you are from God, the further you'll be from your spouse. So work on it. Grow closer to God. Grow closer. Work on the things that make a great marriage. Because it is just a blast when you start to see things click in a marriage. I told my wife on our 31st anniversary, I said, I cannot believe I love you more today than the day I married you. And that's only because we grew. And that's always my hope when I talk to young couples, that that day of the wedding is nice and you do love each other, but I hope in 30 years your love is even greater than when you began. And lastly, to those that wish to remain single, may God honor that wish. There's nothing wrong with being single. And so if that is what you choose, God bless, and may God honor you for that decision. Marriage is the foundational cornerstone of the Christian faith. Without marriage, there is no procreation, there is no new children, there is no growth. We cannot be fruitful and multiply without the institution of marriage. Now, granted, you can all tell me afterwards, yes, you can, I get that. But in a God-honoring way, it is through marriage. So I pray for those that are married. I pray for those that are looking. And may God bless you in your endeavors. Let's close in a word of prayer. Now, Lord, we thank you today. We thank you that you have blessed many people here today with a spouse. And Lord, may they continue to draw closer to you in an effort to draw closer to each other. May their marriages grow. May it explode. May it continue to be this wonderful, wonderful, godly institution. And may we live up to our role and our responsibility as spouses. And may, God, you pour a blessing upon each married couple here today. Also, too, Lord, for those that are looking, give them the wisdom to find the person you have in store for them. And may they be honoring to the godly principles they've set up. And Lord, we thank you for all this in your wonderful name. Amen.